Welcome to the Best in Fintech podcast. I'm Daniel Dimitri, your host and the founder of Trellis Connect and Savvy Insurance. Joining me today, I'm really excited to introduce you all to Yahya Mokhtarzada, formerly a serial entrepreneur, formerly with Nanigans, and now the founder and chief revenue officer of Truebill, one of the fastest growing fintech apps in both app stores. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for hosting, Daniel.
Yeah. So I'd like to start off with talking about finance, fintech. Tell me about what got into your head to start Truebill and what's changed in fintech since that happened.
Yeah, starting Truebill, I started Truebill with my two brothers, and we were sort of sitting around in my brother's basement trying to brainstorm the next big idea. And that just didn't work after 2 weeks of creating nothing.
I think a lot of people have been there.
Yeah, I sort of realized you're not going to just be able to think up and create the idea. Basically, the key is you just got to start building. And from that momentum, creativity will come and you'll figure out what you want to do. So with Truebill, today for people who aren't familiar with it, it's a really robust, very holistic tool to manage your money. Obviously, I drink the Kool-Aid and I think it's the best tool for managing your money. But that includes account monitoring, subscription tracking, cancellation, bill negotiation, automated savings, budgeting, and all sorts of things. But when we started, it was, we really initially just set out to solve a really narrow pain point. And I didn't think it was going to be a company. I just thought it would be a pain point that we could solve in the spirit of, building something. So the idea was that more and more spending was moving to subscriptions, and it was just getting harder and harder to keep track of them. So we said, let's just build something that connects your bank accounts and credit cards and scans your transactions and shows you your subscriptions. And we built that and we sent it out, and people would use it. We sent it out to friends and family, and they would use it. And
what were people using it for?
They'd scan their transactions and be like, "Oh my God, I forgot I was paying for this thing." We'd have people who, "Wow, I was paying for OnStar on my old car," or "I was paying for Audible even though I never listen to audiobooks," right? Or all sorts of things, right? And so we said, okay, cool. There's a little pain point here. That's great that people are finding value. But the more interesting thing was after a couple of weeks, we were getting 30 signups a day, which meant that people were sharing it. So we started digging into the data, and I guess I was kind of struck by the amount of financial inefficiency that existed for people. And so that's when I said, okay, this can be a company. It's not a company about tracking or canceling subscriptions. It's a company about eliminating financial inefficiency in general, right? And so we kind of built towards that for the first year. And then I think in the same way that the vision expanded, it expanded again. And I said, this isn't a company about eliminating financial inefficiency. This is a company about just being the best financial platform, period, right?
Well, that's what's so interesting about Truebill, right? Is that there's a lot of fintechs out there that are replacing a thing that people are already familiar with. Right. Oh, this is my bank account now, or that's my student loan now. And Truebill, I think Truebill is category defining in a large way, right? When you recommend Truebill to a friend, or when your users are recommending Truebill to a friend, what do you think they're saying? What do you think they're saying? Oh, this is hey, try this out. What is it?
Yeah, that's been a gift and a curse, right? When describing Truebill, it's got a lot of features. So again, you end up with one of these nebulous definitions, it's the best platform to run your finances, right? Or you might recommend a specific feature, dude, you got to get Truebill because you're probably paying for stuff you don't need, or you got to get Truebill because you're probably overpaying on your bills, right? Whereas with something like Robinhood, you can sum it up in 3 words, get Robinhood, free investing. Right?
Yeah.
Get Chime, no fee banking, right?
Yeah.
Get Credit Karma, free credit score. Well, Truebill also has the credit score and credit monitoring. Right?
Yeah.
And so as we were building the company, that actually made it really difficult to raise funding. Because we go to VCs, and I'd say, okay, it's this grand platform for finance, or at least that's what it's evolving into.
Right.
And they'd say,
"You're not focused.
What is the single message that users are coming in on? Right?
Yeah.
What's your killer feature that is one single thing that's worth $20 billion?
Yeah.
And that thing is financial management. That obviously didn't fly, right?
Yeah. It's your whole vertical.
Right.
It's all of your theses at once.
Exactly. But I think that's actually like, whereas in the beginning that was seen as a weakness, it's actually now seen as a strength, right? Because so you look at Dave, which is a very successful company and got from zero to, I think they're now valued at like 3 or 4 billion in a couple of years, right? And they did it all on one really narrow value prop, which was get free pay advances or very low cost payday. I don't want to call it payday loans, so payday advances, right? Where they'll give you $100 or $150 ahead of your next paycheck. That's great, but what's happening is, in the last 5 years, you've had dozens of fintech apps pop up, right? And each one sort of had their own unique wedge in the beginning, but now they're all sort of expanding into areas that overlap. So Dave has launched debit cards in the same way that Stash, a robo-investing app, has launched debit cards, in the same way that Square Cash and Robinhood are all also pushing their debit cards, right? And I think it's a safe bet to assume that they're gonna then start pushing out credit cards and other financial products, right? And so whereas Truebill in the beginning was sort of handicapped in that we didn't have that one single killer feature to bring users in on, now, what fintechs are trying to do is bring users in and then push them towards multiple different functional areas, right? So Dave is trying to bring users in for pay advances, but then push them to debit cards and probably in the future push them to credit cards and maybe investing, right? And that's hard to do on the message when the message that you're bringing users in on is get a pay advance. Like, if I come to your app to get a pay advance, why would I bank with you, right? Whereas with Truebill, it's like, if the message you come in on is the best app for your finances, then having a Truebill debit card or Truebill credit card is not a big departure from that initial message, or a big departure from the use case that you might have envisioned on your way in.
Have you talked to, we haven't talked about this before, but have you talked to users about how they think about their finance, or have you gotten into the heads now? You've been doing this now for a few years. Like, what have you learned about the way that people think about their money, and how have you responded to that? And how is it good or bad? Or maybe it's just indifferent. Maybe it's just the way that it is. But I don't know if people think about their finances the way that financial experts want people to think about it.
Certainly not. But what makes building a financial product really, really difficult is there's no one type of user. You don't even have self-selection of one type of user. So for instance, if I make a fitness app, right? You probably have people who are fitness enthusiasts, and then you have people who want to get fit, right? And you can design for those two, right? With finance, I mean, there's just this enormous, like, endless spectrum of different financial personality types that you're building towards, right? So you have people who are super on top of their finances, and they're like financial management enthusiasts, right? And so they like the app for the really granular features, right? And then you have a huge segment of the population that never even looks at their credit card statements, right? And is more detached from their finances. But then even within that segment, you have upper income people and lower income people, right? And their financial needs look nothing alike. If you're high income, you're focused on growing your net worth,
right?
And if you're
taxes and diversification and
exactly,
assets. Yes,
exactly. And on the lower end, you're trying to avoid bank fees and overdraft fees, and keep food on the table. And so,
has Truebill carved out? Are you trying to serve all the users, or have you carved out a piece, or are you starting with a piece, or is it a little bit of a hodgepodge?
Yeah, so certainly more than any other fintech app I can think of, we cast the widest net. We're not going for the super, high net worth individuals, where a company like Personal Capital is going after them. But we certainly have a solid percentage of our users make over 100 or 200K per year, right? Which makes sense, because if the app is kind of helping you catch things you overlooked in your finances, well, as you make more money and you have more accounts, it's easier to miss a $20 charge here or there, right? So the bulk of our user base is in that 600 to 700 FICO score range. It actually ends up mirroring the U.S. population pretty closely, which makes developing it more difficult than if you're able to say, okay, this is our niche. Like, Chime is going after people who are just underserved by traditional banks or taken advantage of by traditional banks. And I think that lets you be more narrow and focused in your product development, which is an advantage and potentially disadvantage. I think time's gonna tell if we're right or wrong on that.
What is the change in the role that you want Truebill to play, or the way that people feel about Truebill in 3 years, 5 years? How's people's answer to that question going to change? Today it's already a pretty broad, like, people are recommending individual features, but how do you want a user like myself to recommend Truebill to my parents who like don't know about it?
Yeah. So I think the company is at this real sort of, crossing the chasm point where if we're able to execute on the vision, what people think of us as in, 2 years from now versus today will actually be different, right? So if, I asked someone what Truebill is today, and I got the answer I wanted, that might be, the best platform for tracking and managing your money, right? So we just closed this $50 million round. Thank you. And part of that is to really fund making bigger bets. And those bets take Truebill from being a financial visibility platform into a financial products company, right? So in the next couple of years, you might see Truebill launch a credit card, a debit card, an investing platform, a credit building product, among other things, right? And so where I think that gets to is Truebill crosses from this financial visibility platform into just the best financial products, right? A platform that sort of unifies and brings together best in class financial products.
Mm-hmm.
And then how your parents might describe that might be just the best financial membership, right? In the same way that like Costco is a great membership for bulk buying of toilet paper. Truebill is this like great value membership for finances.
That's exciting because it does feel like fintech has for a long time played that role of concierge or advisor.
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about sounds different a little bit.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I think that's what's driving the real valuation boom in fintechs, right? Up until not long ago, and when I say fintech, I mean consumer fintechs, right? Like the big exit was Mint, which sold for I think 170 million, right? Which is you can think that was the biggest like personal finance app out there. For it to sell for 170 million is crazy, and then I think Level Money sold for 30 or 40 or something, right? Now you have Chime valued at 30 billion, and Robinhood probably 30, 40, 50 billion now. And I think what happened is, because of the B2B fintech that landscape that's evolved, it made launching financial products within the domain of consumer fintech apps, right? And so whereas all Mint could do was report on your money or give you some visibility, Chime said, no, you know what, actually keep your money with us.
Mm-hmm.
And Robinhood, same thing with investing. It used to be you'd have to go to an E-Trade or something to get an investing account, and there were consumer investing apps, but they were about investing strategy or knowledge, right? Like something like StockTwits. And Robinhood said, we're going to cross from being about visibility or insights into actually being like the platform that you use.
Yeah. A lot of the people who will be listening to this podcast are maybe one step behind where you are today. They're at that Series B, maybe Series C. So they're running 100-person company. How big is Truebill today? What have you learned the hard way or the easy way? But like, what have you learned about running a large organization? What tips do you have to share? Things that have worked really well, things that you wish the rest of the world worked like Truebill, the things that are unique to the culture. I don't know that the Truebill, there's not videos and memoirs about what it was like to start Truebill. Those people haven't come out of the woodwork yet. So give us a little glimpse. What's it like inside of Truebill? What do you guys do differently from the other companies you've worked at? What do you love about the culture?
Right. Since the beginning, I think everyone in the company has been very free to, on their own, sort of identify where they could be impactful and then actually like focus on that thing and try to make a difference on it. And I think we've done a really good job of encouraging that, such that some of the biggest and best things that have happened within the company or within the product have been unplanned and been the result of one or two or five people sort of seeing an opportunity to take a shot at something, to make an improvement at something, or to do something new, and just feeling empowered to do that thing, and feeling okay with knowing that if it didn't work out, there wouldn't be any backlash for that. Mm-hmm. So that's been cool. I think one of the biggest surprises would be that the company's it's about 125 people now, so not big, but not as small as we used to be. You sort of think that, okay, like whether your company is 5 people or 25 people or 50 people, you think, okay, this thing is a challenge, or this thing's taking a lot of my time. I'm going to hire someone to do that, and then my life is going to be easier. And it's always the opposite. Like the more people you hire, the more problems you have, and the more complex everything is. Hiring them, and the slower things move. Like you're never.
I hate to hear this, Yahya, because I've been hiring a lot of people but now I'm staying up later than I used to. So I think
that's exactly
right.
You're like, okay, I'm working till end of the night every night. I'm going to hire like 2 people to help me with this, and I'll be able to like get home at a reasonable hour. And it's actually the opposite every time.
That's the weekends. Okay.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with engineering. I know this isn't actually true, but what it feels like is, you'll never be developing product as quickly as when you have like 3 or 4 engineers. I think that's like peak agility. And then from there, obviously it's understandable your code base gets bigger, so you need more engineers working on it. But that's the fastest you're ever going to be.
How have you guys spent a lot of time thinking about your employer value proposition? And are you taking people, have you found it successful to pull people out of incumbent banks, or more out of fintech, or more just outside of the whole industry overall, or it doesn't matter?
We have not been pulling people out of banks. So the company is headquartered right outside Washington, D.C. Originally, it was in San Francisco. Surprisingly, moving headquarters from San Francisco to D.C. was one of the best decisions we ever made in terms of like being able to attract and retain talent, and I think just to have an awesome culture. In terms of where we hire from, I think the number one thing we look for is just good companies that went through fast growth. I think there's a mindset that people get into when they're at a company that goes from 100 to 1,000 employees. And there's valuable experience that comes with that, right? And so the more you can hire people that have been through the transition that you yourself are trying to go through, I think the more you set yourself up for success. And then similarly, I've always been cautious about hiring from places with bad culture, right? So this is a generalization, so there's certainly exceptions. You need to take it on an individual basis, right? But let's say you have someone who worked for the government for the last 15 years, right? It means 2 things. One, they've spent 15 years getting like indoctrinated into a way of working and a pace of working in a certain like structure that they're under. And 2, they're fundamentally okay with that, right? So if you see someone, if we get an application in from like someone who spent 8 years at AOL or Yahoo, right? If someone spent 11 months at Yahoo and left, that's not necessarily a bad flag, right? They went there, it wasn't the right fit, and they left. But if you see someone who actually like leveled up several times at Yahoo, well, that organization had its challenges and didn't always reward the things that you might want to be rewarding at your company, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that they survived and thrived there,
it's almost a counter signal.
Yeah, it can be a counter signal, right?
Interesting. One subject that I've run into as a CEO that I think a lot of CEOs and chief product officers out there are probably running into is that question of, in a high growth environment, how do you think about things like titles? Like early stage startup, like they often have title inflation at early stage, but now you guys are growing. How have you managed that? What works? What doesn't work? Is there no right answer? It's always messy.
I think the answer is you really have to be disciplined and hold the line. at my last company, the CEO said titles are free, or titles don't cost anything.
Yes,
right?
I've heard
so
that.
Everyone got every title, whatever title they wanted, right?
Chief revenue czar. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. King of engineering.
Or you bring in like, a kid 2 years out of college and he wants to be like, VP something, and you just give it to him because why not? It doesn't cost anything, right?
Right.
And that's not gonna cost you anything organizationally when you're 25 or 50 employees, right? But at 100 or 200, there's going to be like an organizational tax to that, right? And so I think the way to handle it is you hold the line. You take whatever pain comes from it up front, but you save yourself a lot of headaches down the line.
Yeah, great. So as we wrap up here, one question I like to ask people is, who's inspired you or taught you some of those skills that you're bringing to Truebill to deliver the success that you're bringing today?
Man, a lot of people, right? I've definitely learned a bunch from you. I think what you've, the way that you've run and grown Trellis has been really sort of interesting and inspiring to see. Or more specifically, the pace that you guys move has been really, really interesting and inspiring to see. And I think a lot of that comes from like your management style. Like of all the CEOs I interact with, you are the most like metrics level person I've seen. In terms of like in a conversation, I can ask you, any random metric about our account even, or about your business as a whole, and you know it off the top of your head, right? And
I do a lot of fishing for compliments, but for the record, I didn't. Yeah, your check's in the mail, but I didn't intend for this to be. But I appreciate it. I did not intend to be fishing for compliments.
I know.
Metrics driven, yeah.
But yeah, so one thing I've seen consistent across like the best organizational leaders is their ability to not get abstracted away from the business, or to not be moved, but instead to like stay involved at a like core metrics level daily.
Have you seen that in other companies you've worked at, or are there leaders you aspire to be like that you've heard talk or that you like or know about?
So yeah, I think first and foremost, I'm fortunate that I have an older brother who actually replaced me as CEO at Truebill. And I think he's, just a world-class, phenomenal, both CEO and head of product. And, I think we're really fortunate that he's able to kind of combine those two under one person, because there's huge organizational benefits to that. Beyond that, my last company, Nanigans, was an ad tech company, and our two biggest segments were social gaming and e-commerce, right? And so I got to meet a lot of executives at those companies, and in social gaming specifically, your entire company is the metrics on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, there's this notion that people make. It used to be that games were made to be fun, right? Like when Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 was made, they said, how do we make the most fun game, right? But that's not the way games developed anymore. Now they're developed with how do we make the most engaging, retentive game, right? And so I think working in Nanigans was really just a great sort of startup college experience for me, in that I got to be involved at a metric level at the top 25 different gaming companies and the top 25 different e-com companies, and understand sort of what are the metrics that they're looking at, and how are they...
that Nanigans was the CEO bringing that metric orientation, or was it more of the CRO there? Or
no, it was definitely the CEO, but also it was an ad tech company, so that's it had to be that way, right?
Yeah. Who was the CEO while you were there?
Rick Calvillo. So brilliant guy. Cool. And then obviously, I'm a huge business book junkie. So like Reid Hastings' book is awesome.
Do you recommend books to people who come to work for you, or do you even require reading?
We don't have required reading, but we have like a company library of like recommended books, right? One of the ones that I like, even though it's not completely accurate, is PayPal Words. I think that just captures like the startup mentality better than anything else. And then there's a number of books just by people who built fantastic companies. Like all the big tech CEOs have a book now. Satya Nadella's book, the Microsoft CEO's book, was really, really fantastic. Not Tech, but Shoe Dog by Phil Knight was amazing. The Sam Walton's book is another one of my favorites. In addition to all the tech books that everyone's read.
What does Sam Walton do, or how does he think in a way that you want to be more like him?
Yeah, so he has two things. One, obviously, he was very aggressively focused on growth and expansion. But where he was different from the other books I've come across is he was maniacal about efficiency. So he'd walk the aisle of every one of his stores and get into the books and figure out how to cut 3 cents here or 4 cents there. And their thesis was, if we can be more efficient, we can sell goods for less, which gives more value to our customers, which will make us win, right? As a startup, you get this round of capital, and it's very easy to feel tempted to go out and buy an ice sculpture or a chrome panda. His book presents the counter side to that. I mentioned chrome panda. One of my favorite things that I always cite to my employees is in the Dropbox lobby in San Francisco, they have this giant chrome panda, and it looks really cool. And then at the base of it, they have a sign that says, we bought this chrome panda for, I think it was like $100,000 when we raised some obscene amount of funding, and it was a mistake. And
it was a mistake.
It was a mistake, and we keep it here as a reminder for who we are not and of what we don't want to do.
Sounds like you need to buy a chrome panda and put a plaque on it.
Or just take a glance at Dropboxes when I start forgetting.
That sounds like it works too. Yahya, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was great to hang out.